A few centuries ago, a Catholic immigrant could step onto American soil with a rosary in his pocket, a prayer on his lips, and the heavy knowledge that many people in this new land did not trust him. Some believed Catholics could never be loyal citizens. Others feared the Catholic Church was foreign, dangerous, and impossible to fit into the young American experiment. Yet from that suspicion came one of the most remarkable religious stories in the United States. Today, Catholics are found in every state, in crowded city parishes, quiet rural churches, immigrant neighborhoods, universities, schools, hospitals, and family homes where the faith is still passed from one generation to the next. They speak different languages, carry different traditions, and come from many cultures, but together they have shaped a Catholic story, unlike the one found in Italy, Spain, Latin America, or anywhere else in the world. So how did Catholics in America move from suspicion to influence? How did a community once treated as outsiders put down roots so deep that it became part of the nation's spiritual and cultural identity? The answer is not simple, and it is far more dramatic than most people realize. This is the story of Catholics in America, a story of prejudice and perseverance, migration and memory, schools and parishes, sacrifice and survival, and a faith that slowly found its place in a country still trying to understand itself. If you enjoy discovering the hidden history and living culture of the Catholic Church, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey through the remarkable story of Catholics in America. The Catholic story in America did not begin with power. It began in the shadows, in small rooms, on dangerous coastlines, and inside communities that knew what it meant to be watched with suspicion. Long before Catholic cathedrals stood proudly in American cities, long before Catholic universities became respected institutions, long before Catholic hospitals and schools became part of the national landscape, the Catholic presence in the colonies was fragile, scattered, and often unwelcome. For much of early American history, Catholics were not seen as builders of the nation. They were seen as outsiders who had to prove they belonged. That tension is the first key to understanding Catholics in America. Their story is not the same as the Catholic story in Italy, Spain, or Latin America, where Catholicism shaped national memory from the center of public life. In the United States, Catholicism had to grow inside a culture that often treated it as foreign. The Church carried the same sacraments, the same Mass, the same devotion to the saints, and the same loyalty to Rome, but it had to speak inside a nation formed largely by Protestant instincts, revolutionary language, suspicion of monarchy, fear of foreign authority, and a deep desire to define itself as free from the old conflicts of Europe. That created a strange and powerful contradiction. Catholics in America would eventually become one of the largest, most educated, and most influential religious communities in the country. Yet from the beginning, they also carried the memory of being marginalized, mocked, excluded, and questioned. American Catholicism became strong, but it never fully forgot what it felt like to be unwanted. That wound shaped its schools, its politics, its neighborhoods, its pride, and even the way Catholics learned to explain themselves to the wider American public. In the colonial period, the Catholic footprint was small. Maryland offered one of the rare early spaces where Catholics could find a measure of refuge, especially for English Catholics who had suffered under anti-Catholic pressure back home. But even there, the safety was never complete. The Catholic experiment in Maryland was shaken when political power shifted and Protestant control took hold. The official religious culture changed, and Catholics once again learned that tolerance could be temporary. A door could open, but it could also close without warning. Beyond Maryland, the situation was often harsher. In places like Virginia and New England, Catholics had little room to settle openly or practice publicly. The colonies were shaped by Protestant groups that had brought their own memories of conflict with Catholic Europe. Even where there were only a few Catholics, fear of Catholicism could feel larger than the Catholic population itself. The image of the Catholic was often built less from real encounters and more from old inherited suspicion. People feared what they barely knew. Then came the American Revolution, and with it, a new question. Could Catholics belong in a republic built on liberty? One Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, Charles Carroll, stood as a powerful answer to that question. His presence did not erase anti-Catholic prejudice, but it cracked the stereotype. His brother, John Carroll, would become the first Catholic bishop in the new American nation, giving the church a visible structure in a country where Catholic life had once been so thin and fragile. These figures did not make Catholicism dominant, but they signaled that Catholics were no longer invisible. The real transformation came later, not through conquest, but through movement. America expanded, and Catholic populations entered the national story in waves. The Louisiana Purchase brought lands with a deep French Catholic imprint into the growing republic. Cities like New Orleans carried a Catholic atmosphere that felt different from the older Protestant colonies. The faith was not arriving only through individual immigrants anymore. Entire regions with Catholic memory were being folded into the American map. Then the Irish came in greater numbers. At first, their arrival looked like a trickle. Soon it became a flood. Hunger, poverty, and the devastation of the potato famine pushed countless Irish families across the ocean. Many arrived with very little money, little social status, and almost no protection from the contempt of those who saw them as dirty, desperate, and dangerously Catholic. In cities like Boston and New York, they filled neighborhoods, worked brutal jobs, built parish communities, and carried a fierce religious identity that was both a comfort and a target. The drama did not stop there. German Catholics moved into the Midwest, bringing another language, another rhythm of parish life, and another layer of Catholic identity. After the war with Mexico, large numbers of Mexican Catholics became part of the American story, especially across the southern and western regions. Later, Italians, Slavic Catholics, Eastern Europeans, and many others arrived, each adding their own devotions, foods, festivals, saints, accents, and memories. The Catholic Church in America was never one single cultural bloc. It was Irish and Italian, German and Mexican, Polish and French, later Filipino, Vietnamese, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Nigerian, Korean, and more. It was one church speaking with many voices. For many Protestant Americans, that diversity was not easy to understand. They had categories for Protestants because Protestant divisions were already familiar in American life. But the global diversity of Catholicism felt strange. A Catholic could speak Italian in one neighborhood, Spanish in another, German in the Midwest, French in Louisiana, Polish in another parish, and still belong to the same universal church. To outsiders, this looked like a foreign force spreading through the country. To Catholics, it was simply the church breathing through many cultures. Fear turned into propaganda. Anti-Catholic stories spread through newspapers, speeches, sermons, cartoons, and books. Catholics were accused of being loyal to a foreign power. They were accused of threatening democracy. Priests and nuns were mocked as corrupt, secretive, and dangerous. Monasteries and convents became the subject of wild rumors. One anti-Catholic book in the 1830s became a bestseller by claiming to expose horrors inside Catholic religious life. Even though the story was later recognized as fiction, the damage had already been done. Lies traveled faster than correction, and the Catholic image in the American imagination became darker. Sometimes that fear became violent. Anti-Catholic riots broke out. Churches and Catholic institutions were attacked. People were beaten. Neighborhoods became tense places where identity could be dangerous. Catholic immigrants learned quickly that in America, freedom of religion did not always mean freedom from hatred. The nation promised liberty, but the street could still punish you for the rosary in your pocket, the accent in your voice, or the parish you attended on Sunday. Political movements rose from this fear. The Know Nothing movement, built in large part around opposition to Catholic immigration, captured a deep anxiety in the American mind. Its members claimed to defend American identity, but beneath that language was a suspicion that Catholics could never truly belong. The idea was simple and poisonous. Catholic immigrants were not just poor newcomers. They were a threat to the future of the country. That accusation would echo for generations. The attack was not only political, it was cultural. Some Protestant leaders blamed Catholics for moral decay, poverty, drunkenness, and social disorder. Irish Catholics in particular were often painted as reckless, ignorant, and unfit for full respect. The irony was painful. Many of these immigrants were doing exactly what America claimed to admire. They worked hard. They built families. They endured humiliation. They pushed their children toward education. They believed that labor, sacrifice, and perseverance could open the future. Yet their very effort was often dismissed because they were Catholic. This pressure pushed Catholic communities inward. In cities, Catholics formed their own neighborhoods, not only because they wanted familiarity, but because exclusion forced them to depend on one another. Little Italy, Irish neighborhoods, Polish parishes, and ethnic Catholic districts became more than cultural enclaves. They were survival systems. The parish was not just a church building, it was a school, a social network, a place to find work, a place to hear your language, a place to bury your dead, a place where your children learned they did not need to be ashamed of who they were. From that struggle came one of the greatest Catholic responses in American history: education. If Catholic children were pushed into public schools shaped by Protestant assumptions, Catholic leaders and families began building their own schools. If Catholic students were expected to hide their faith, parochial schools gave them a place where faith and learning could stand together. If universities carried prestige in American life, Catholics would build universities capable of standing beside the best institutions in the country. This is one of the most powerful turns in the story. Marginalization did not destroy American Catholicism. It forced Catholics to build. They built schools because they were excluded. They built universities because they wanted intellectual respect. They built hospitals because charity was part of their faith. They built orphanages, charities, seminaries, and parish networks because they understood that survival required structure. The very institutions that later made Catholicism so influential in America often grew from moments when Catholics were told they did not belong. Catholic schools became a quiet revolution. They formed children not only in reading and mathematics, but in identity, discipline, prayer, and moral imagination. Many were staffed by religious sisters whose sacrifice shaped generations. Their work rarely looked dramatic from the outside, but inside classrooms, entire communities were being strengthened. A child who heard insults in the street could enter a Catholic school and be told that his faith was not shameful. A family that felt pushed to the edge of American life could see its children educated, prepared, and lifted into a new future. The same pattern shaped Catholic universities. Many were founded in places where Catholic immigrants had settled heavily, especially in the East and Midwest. These institutions carried a deeper mission than academic ambition. They were a public answer to humiliation. They said that Catholics could think seriously, lead responsibly, study deeply, and contribute to the country without surrendering their faith. The classroom became a battleground of dignity. Yet the old suspicion did not disappear. Even as Catholics became more established, anti-Catholic feeling kept returning in new forms. Public hostility might become less open, but the question remained under the surface. Could a Catholic be fully American and fully Catholic at the same time? That question reached one of its most famous moments when John F. Kennedy ran for president. In the 20th century, after all the talk of liberty and progress, many Americans still worried that a Catholic president would take orders from Rome. Kennedy had to address the issue directly, not because Catholicism was new, but because the old fear had never truly died. His election marked a turning point, but not a complete healing. It proved that a Catholic could reach the highest office in the land, but the fact that he had to defend his loyalty revealed how deep the suspicion remained. For American Catholics, this moment carried both pride and pain. Pride because one of their own had broken a barrier. Pain because the barrier had existed for so long. By the late 20th century and into the 21st century, the Catholic face of America changed again. Immigration from Latin America brought new energy, new pressures, and new questions. Hispanic Catholics filled parishes, renewed devotions, brought processions, Marian feasts, family-centered faith, and a strong sacramental imagination. In many places, Spanish-language masses became not a side note, but the heartbeat of parish life. The future of American Catholicism began to sound bilingual. Yet this growth also created another layer of tension. Some Americans who had once feared Irish, Italian, and Eastern European Catholics now feared Latin American Catholic immigrants. The names changed. The accents changed. The old anxiety remained. Once again, Catholic identity became tied to immigration, labor, poverty, language, and belonging. Once again, Catholics had to explain that they were not a foreign invasion, but families seeking life, faith, work, and dignity. The Catholic Church in America now stands inside a contradiction that has followed it from the beginning. It is powerful, but still contested. It is wealthy in institutions, yet wounded in trust. It is influential in education, healthcare, politics, and charity, yet many Catholics feel spiritually homeless in a secular age. It has millions of members, yet many parishes struggle to keep the next generation close. It carries deep roots, yet it must keep proving that those roots still bear fruit. That is why the American Catholic story cannot be reduced to triumph or decline. It is both wounded and alive. It is both old and changing. It is both deeply American and unmistakably connected to a global church. It has been shaped by suspicion, but also by resilience. It has been pressured by prejudice, but also strengthened by sacrifice. It has been mocked as foreign, yet it helped build some of the most recognizable schools, hospitals, neighborhoods, and charitable works in the country. The deeper question is not only how Catholics came to America. The deeper question is how America changed Catholicism, and how Catholicism changed America. In countries where Catholicism stood at the center of public life, the Church often shaped culture from above. In America, Catholics often had to shape culture from below, through families, parishes, schools, labor, and immigrant neighborhoods. They did not begin with national dominance. They began with survival, and survival gave their faith a different tone. American Catholicism learned to defend itself in public. It learned to build institutions. It learned to speak across cultures. It learned to carry Rome in one hand and the American flag in the other, sometimes peacefully, sometimes painfully. It learned that faith in America would always be tested by freedom, pluralism, suspicion, ambition, and the pressure to blend in. And yet, beneath all the politics and history, the heart of the story remains human. A mother teaching her child the sign of the cross in a tenement apartment. A father working long hours so his children can attend a Catholic school. A young priest serving immigrants who barely speak English. A nun walking into a classroom before sunrise. A family walking past insults to reach Sunday Mass. A student in a Catholic university asking whether faith can still matter in a modern world. These moments do not always make headlines, but they are the hidden architecture of Catholic America. Catholics in America have never been only a religious statistic. They are a memory of migration. They are a story of suspicion answered by perseverance. They are a network of parishes, classrooms, hospitals, charities, and families. They are a community that has been accused of being foreign, then became part of the American mainstream, while still carrying the uneasy feeling that acceptance can be fragile. The next chapter is still unwritten. The Church faces secularization, scandal, polarization, declining practice in some regions, and confusion among younger generations. But it also carries gifts that America desperately needs: a sacramental vision of life, a defense of human dignity, a memory of suffering, a love for education, a tradition of service, and a faith that has survived centuries of being misunderstood. So the story of Catholics in America is not just about the past. It is about a question still alive in the present. Can an ancient church keep its soul in a restless modern nation? Can Catholics remain faithful without becoming isolated? Can they serve America without being swallowed by its politics? Can they remember the immigrant, the poor, the student, the sick, the unborn, the elderly, the forgotten, and the stranger, not as issues, but as people made in the image of God? The answer will not come from headlines alone. It will come from parishes that become alive again. It will come from families that pray again. It will come from schools that form character, not only careers. It will come from Catholics who stop apologizing for their faith and start living it with humility, courage, and joy. Because Catholics in America have always lived between pressure and promise. They came through suspicion. They built through exclusion. They endured mockery. They educated their children. They served the sick. They entered public life. They carried many languages into one church. And through it all, they left a mark on the American soul. The story of Catholics in America is not only a story of immigrants, churches, schools, and political suspicion. It is the story of a faith that entered a country unsure whether it could trust Catholics, then slowly proved itself through sacrifice, service, education, family life, and perseverance. From small colonial communities to crowded urban parishes, from anti-Catholic riots to Catholic universities, from immigrant neighborhoods to the highest levels of public life, Catholics have left a mark that cannot be erased from the American story. And yet, this story is still unfinished. The Catholic Church in America still faces deep challenges: secularization, division, scandal, declining practice in some places, and the struggle to pass the faith to the next generation. But the same church also carries a powerful legacy of resilience. It has survived suspicion before. It has rebuilt after rejection before. It has formed families, educated children, served the sick, defended human dignity, and reminded America that faith is not only something kept inside a church, it is something lived in schools, hospitals, homes, neighborhoods, and public life. So perhaps the real question is not simply where Catholics fit into American history. The deeper question is what kind of witness Catholics will offer America now. Will they become silent in a restless culture, or will they live their faith with courage, humility, and joy? Will they allow the past to become only memory, or will they turn that memory into mission? Thank you for joining us on this journey through the remarkable story of Catholics in America. If this video helped you see the Catholic Church in the United States with deeper understanding, share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this history surprised you the most? And if you want more stories about Catholic culture, church history, and the living faith around the world, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss our next journey. May God bless you, and see you in the next video.